It's going to be very easy to kind of half listen to an online course, plug the recording into AI and say, help me write an essay based on this. And I'm not suggesting that that's cheating. It's sort of using these tools that are available to us.
I guess if learning becomes a tick box exercise, or you're going through the motions just to do an assignment, get a result, get a grade on a piece of paper, then I think people will take shortcuts because they find it's too useful.
Critical thinking is the most important skill for today's society, full stop. Because yes, we need more technical skills, but particularly when it comes to emerging tech and AI, it's our ability to question the information that is being delivered to us.
Welcome to another episode of Relearning Work, where we dive into the future of learning and work. In each episode, we bring you conversations with leaders from industry and education to challenge assumptions, propose ideas, and share learnings as we all navigate this world that is being reshaped by Agentic AI. Now, whether you're an educator, a student, or a business executive looking to stay ahead in this rapidly changing landscape, there's something here for you. I'm your host, David Yip. My guest today is Peita Davis, Director of Skills, Education and Research at the Business Council of Australia, where she leads skills and education reform for Australia's 130 largest employers, building partnerships that align learning systems with real labour market needs. Peita's career journey is fascinating, from an aspiring journalist to backpacking as a teenager through the Middle East, then spending over a decade in Australia's intelligence community, briefing prime ministers and shaping national security policy, then founding her own successful e-commerce business. Now she's driving Australia's national skills strategy, tackling critical talent shortages through practical industry-led solutions. Welcome to the show, Peita.
Thank you, David. It's fantastic to be here.
Yeah. Now, I have to say, when I went through some of the career pathways you took, like particularly the backpacking to the Middle East part and spending time in the intelligence community, that's a fascinating story. Can you share how you got here from that to now with policies around skills?
I mean, to say that my journey is non-linear, I think is a bit of an understatement. It has been an interesting sort of journey, but I guess, it all started, I decided when I was 14 years old that I was going to move to England. So I grew up in Canberra, and Canberra in the 90s was pretty dire. So I was determined every single day that I was going to leave. So as soon as I finished school, I moved to the UK, and while I was there working and having a great time, I bumped into another Aussie chick in a bar, and she was telling me about these amazing tree houses that she stayed in Turkey. And I was like, oh, I want to stay in tree houses in Turkey. That sounds incredible. So I just bought a one-way ticket to Turkey, took a tiny little school bag that had a couple of spare pieces of clothing and and a notepad and a pen, and just went to the Middle East. And so this was pre 9/11, so it was a very different time. So it was fascinating, sort of backpacked all the way through the Middle East, and it sort of awoke this real passion in me for the Middle East and the politics of the region.
That must take some courage as well, certainly at such a young age as well, going to a completely foreign land, not just, really far away, but culturally, language. That takes a big leap of faith as well.
Yeah, it's interesting you say sort of big leap of faith. I think that's the one sort of constant, I guess, throughout my whole sort of life. It's like if I put my mind to something, even if it's scary, I'll just make myself do it. In fact, I think scaring yourself is a big motivator. Figure out what scares you and force yourself to do it. So it was a bit of a leap of faith, and but also I had a very supportive family who just sort of backed me and trusted me that I would take care of myself, and I did. It was an incredible experience, and it sort of set me up for my whole career.
Well, I mean, I want to explore the mindset behind that too, because I always explore this with my guests on this show, because we're faced with quite an interesting time right now. And I think we do need to take a big leap of faith sometimes into the great unknown and leave our comfort zones. And so can you describe it of, what the mindset is that you need to be in, or what that you took back then, and how that's carried you forward, different opportunities, taking this great adventure?
I think it comes down to curiosity. For me personally, it was, as I say, I grew up in a very sort of suburban, smallish town, and I just wanted to see what the rest of the world was like. So it was really rooted in a very intense curiosity. And I think that curiosity is what has traveled with me all the way through. It's, I just wanted to learn things and find out about the world and learn about people and, going to starting a business. It was like, how do you start a business? What does a business do? How do you figure it out? And it's that real curiosity that sort of has always underpinned what I do. And I think if you have curiosity and you lean into that, I think it's amazing what you can find.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so important. But some people think, oh no, some people are just naturally curious. I'm not curious. Do you think curiosity is something that can be learned? It's a skill that you can actually hone and get better at?
Look, I do actually, and I agree. Like some people are perhaps more curious than the others, but what we all have interests and passions, all of us. And so while for me, perhaps I have a very broad curiosity and I love finding out about a bunch of stuff, other people just have very narrow but incredibly intense curiosity. And so you can build that muscle, that curiosity muscle, just by starting with the thing that you're passionate about and then maybe wriggling a little further out, pushing those edges a little bit more and finding out what's connected to that and what that could look like. And I think that's how you can kind of build that muscle. But showing what is available, that's where I think you can spark curiosity in young people in particular. It's, just giving them hints about whether it's, science or maths or, fantastic literature or for me, international politics. And so I think it's exposure to a wide range of things until you can find the thing that you really want to go after.
And I think also what you said just then, finding new things to learn about, to experience, but the rewards, along the way that you pick up, that rewards that curiosity is also really important, right? When you learn something new and it feels good, you grow, you get a pleasant experience, and that reinforces that curiosity.
Yeah, I think you're right. And it's, that's a really interesting point, particularly in today's society where, often we talk about how social media, it sort of triggers the endorphin high rush and so that we're almost getting artificial rushes of reward through media and social media. And discovering something new that you do on your own and setting your mind to it and sort of really working towards it, having those kind of endorphins, they're deep, they really sit with you, they're really valuable. And I think making sure that particularly young people are experiencing those forms of rewards as well as the daily kind of ones that we get with our society is really important, because you're right, the satisfaction when you're curious about something and you go after it and then you either learn it or you see it or you're inside it, that's an incredibly powerful feeling.
Yeah. And the learning part is super important now, and not just for young people too, but I think it's something we all have to constantly know how to do and actually do learning. First of all, knowing how to learn, learning to learn. I think the CEO of Anthropic, he made a comment recently that the skill that is going to be super important in this AI era is actually learning how to learn.
I couldn't agree with that more. I think that's it. And to me, this is, the ticket to actual lifelong learning is we need people to get out of the mindset that learning equals sitting in a classroom or sitting in a lecture theatre. It's that curiosity and it's going after things and sort of, figuring out, educating yourself basically.
But, the learning how to learn, that skill, I don't think is actually taught very well. I think people assume you'll pick it up along the way, but it's not until pretty later on in life. Some people do an education degree and learn how people learn or take on some specialist courses to learn that domain itself. But most, I think, it just kind of happens. What do you think about that? Do you think we're missing a really important thing here?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of points to unpack in that comment. I think often your experiences as a young person, particularly with your learning, can really shape how you are going forward. And if you were at school and perhaps you didn't have particularly supportive teachers or you just found that type of learning environment really challenging, you could have had a really poor experience, which then makes you think, I'm crap at school, I can't learn, I don't want to do a uni degree, I don't want to do a trade, I don't want to do these things because I can't do it. And it's sort of those sort of feelings will reinforce all the way through. I think, hats off to teachers. Half my family are teachers. It's a really, really important job. It is so challenging, though, to be able to specialize and target different learning methods for all different, students. And interestingly, I think this is where AI can really come to the fore. And I think AI in EdTech, I think, is really exciting and something that I think is probably going to change our society going forward.
Yeah. Well, on that one, absolutely. I think if there's one industry or one sector, in our world that is the epicenter of AI's impact, I think that's education. It has to be that. It's touching every single industry. No industry is immune, but the epicenter of this impact is education, because that's where, we learn things. That's where, I guess we cultivate intelligence, I guess. That's where we build skills and capabilities, and AI is at the core of that. And AI can amplify everything that we do, but we need to find a new way of working with this technology, new way of learning, knowing how to learn, going back to first principles, and not take those skills for granted.
Yeah, precisely. And, as you say, AI has all these incredible opportunities for education in particular, but that's also where I see the greatest danger, because unless you have that curiosity and you are constantly almost like self-regulating, teaching yourself, it will be very easy to use AI to have shortcuts all the way through your education. And I think going forward, we're going to have to reshape the way that we teach people to make sure that there is that more human, personal connection. I wouldn't be surprised if we start moving away from online education, for example, at university, etc. Because unless we're face to face, unless we're having conversations, unless we're challenging each other's thoughts, it's going to be very easy to kind of half listen to an online course, plug the recording into AI and say, help me write an essay based on this. And I'm not suggesting that that's cheating. It's sort of using these tools that are available to us, but it could result in us having less critical thinking, less curiosity, and less ability to continue that lifelong learning.
Well, I guess if learning becomes a tick box exercise, you're going through the motions just to, do an assignment, get a result, get a grade on a piece of paper, then I think people will take shortcuts, because they don't really find it's too useful. They're going through the motions because they have to, not because they want to. So I think probably have to go back to first principle and think about how do we inspire and motivate people to learn what they actually want to learn, not because the curriculum says you must do X, Y, Z. And I think of it as, it's like the music industry. Once upon a time, when you buy songs, you go and buy a CD. There's only one song in there that you really like, but they make you buy the whole CD.
But having said that, haven't you fallen in love with many albums by being forced to listen to the whole thing? See, this is the flip side of that. It's like, you've got to take your medicine. We might not always have a curriculum that we love every aspect of it, but we need those foundational building blocks that will then enable us to drill down into things that we love. So again, it's almost that internal discipline about education and learning that I feel we need to try to instill into our society.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, that's a really good point. If it wasn't for some of those, additional things you just have to do, I probably wouldn't have discovered a whole bunch of hobbies and interests. But sometimes you look at it and go, I just want this song. And you're kind of forced to listen to a whole bunch of other ones. And you go, okay, that one's pretty good too. Oh, that one's pretty good too as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But that's another, goodness, I don't want this to become a sort of commentary on sort of younger generations, but when we talk about music, I think that's another really interesting example of this pick and mix society that we're developing. When we were going through school, we would have to buy albums and sort of get to know those, but because of Spotify and all the great music streaming services, you can just sort of select the one or two songs that you love. And again, that narrows your curiosity because you're just going to that one song that you love. And so in a way, it's like there's so many pressures around our society now that is sort of narrowing our interests in what is available to us, and we need to figure out how we get people thinking big and get people trying new things.
As you were saying that, it occurred to me, our curiosity is almost being dampened by these algorithms. Instead of discovering new things, we're fed things by an algorithm. And now I guess it's good that kind of understand that these algorithms, how they work, and sometimes it can be a bit of an echo chamber. So we consciously try to break out of that. But that kind of goes against, it hampers your ability to develop curiosity almost, because you're just constantly fed this stream of content, songs that, because you like this, you might like this as well,
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And it's like it becomes this two-dimensional sort of bland vision of our identity. And we're constantly just fed that, which means that we can't sort of push, it's hard to push out of those barriers that are set around with us just by using these fantastic tools that are made available.
Yeah. I think that human connection that you made the point before, maybe there might be a shift away from all these online courses to bring people back into real life settings, face-to-face settings, be it a classroom or other places. I think that's where the magic happens, when a whole bunch of humans get together, that randomness, that human interaction,
The
the
spiky
challenge.
bits. Yeah, the
Yeah,
bits that you
yeah,
have to actually,
yeah,
you have to form an argument because you've got someone who
yeah.
has a different view in front of
Yeah.
you. Yeah,
No,
completely.
no, no algorithm's going to feed you something. You got to work
That's
it
right.
out. You got to
Yeah.
engage with your fellow humans.
I think it might be a bit of a sort of back to the future kind of moment where we have these sort of classroom settings that were sort of almost pre-internet, where we are sort of together in small group settings where we're discussing ideas and really workshopping things. And exams will probably have to come back into our curriculum a hell of a lot more with AI to really test people's knowledge. All of these great positive opportunities always have a flip side when it comes to AI. And I think the downside of this back to the future, back to face-to-face sort of training is the lack of flexibility. And we do know that online courses and online delivery has really cut through a lot of sort of diversity and inclusion kind of barriers that are out there. It's so much easier to be able to do an online course, after you've put your kids to bed, you've got
Yeah.
a couple of quiet hours, whereas it'd be very difficult to get into a classroom at a set time. So balancing those two things, I think, will be our greatest challenge moving forward.
Yeah. And I think that this goes to the heart of the flipped classroom model, which is really popular, where the online medium is used to provide the content and you sort of learn that in your own time. And then hopefully whatever you're studying has a classroom component, and you don't come to the classroom to receive knowledge or instruction. You come to the classroom to ask questions, to interact, and to try to apply some of that knowledge that you learned in your own time using an online medium.
Absolutely. In fact, I just completed a course that was which basically was that model. And you're highly motivated to do all the readings because you don't want to be caught out in the classroom the
Yeah.
next day. So
Yeah. Yeah.
you do have that motivation to do all the readings and try to absorb the information. But yeah, it was a great way to really help you understand the content.
I think that's probably a good segue into, you mentioned training, right? So sometimes in the education system, we kind of separate knowledge and skills, learning content and also the training aspect. It's almost two different worlds. You got the vocational sector is focusing on training. You got the universities focused on the knowledge part. But do you think, these two worlds are a bit too far apart? They have to come together, right?
Well, this is the interesting thing because I've come from a very different background and a different journey, coming into the skill space proper, I guess, and really sort of getting into the nitty gritty of the systems. I have been utterly baffled by some of these divides. Like, logically, this does not make any sense. How on earth is skills the domain of one sector and knowledge the domain of another? That doesn't make any logical sense. Skills and knowledge are part of the entire education package. And I think, vernacular counts, words count. And, we need to stop just assuming that vet equals skills and uni equals knowledge. I think we're getting there, but yeah, I push back on that really hard. I even, in my mind, I know it doesn't often sort of land very well, but I like to call apprentices trade students. They are students, just the
Yeah.
same as an engineering student, as
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
arts
And
degree
that's a
student.
super good point as well, because the word apprentice implies you're in a trade, you're in a vocational institute. People don't usually associate that term to uni students or higher education, but why? You can be an apprentice engineer or an apprentice accountant or apprentice software developer, right? That concept, just means you're still learning it, but you're applying it, being trained to use some of the knowledge that you're learning. And
That's right.
so,
And we're going to
yeah.
have to use that model more for different type of education. And so, yeah, I feel like using the language and we talk a lot about this sort of the status divide between vet and higher ed. And I think sort of harmonizing the language is often the first step. And yeah, they are all students.
Yeah. And that's why this whole harmonization initiative that's happening right now to bring these two sectors a lot closer together, and making a really important point that harmonization doesn't mean you want the same, but harmonization just means you're breaking some of these barriers, making it student centric, so students can focus on what they want to learn rather than some of the red tape, trying to separating those things. But going to the training part, I think that is super important at the moment, because we need to apply what we learn, the knowledge that we gain. I mean, knowledge, finding solutions, finding answers to problems, that's really been the core of education for a long time, right? Since K-12 through the, undergrad, it's kind of focused on helping you gain some knowledge and then solving some problems and coming up with the answers. But right now, finding answers seems like that's the easy bit. You can just ask ChatGPT to give you an answer. The hard bit is asking the question. Yeah.
That's exactly right. And to me, that's the difference. I think critical thinking is the most important skill for today's society, full stop. Because yes, we need more technical skills, but particularly when it comes to emerging tech and AI, it's our ability to question the information that is being delivered to us. That's what's going to keep us apart from just being sucked into a vortex of, substandard information and, going backwards intellectually. I think critical thinking it should be taught to every student. There should be,
and start early as well.
Early, absolutely.
Like
this is something
primary school.
Oh, absolutely. I've been pondering this a lot, particularly about hallucinations and AI. And the way that we can identify hallucinations is that we have all this knowledge and experience and critical thinking ability, which means that we can identify a red flag. We can go, oh, that doesn't feel right. I'm going to do some additional research and see if that's right or not. How do young people do that? How would they possibly be able to identify a hallucination when they don't yet have that skills and knowledge background? Years of experience, basically. To me,
they don't have the context.
Well, they don't have the context. That's exactly right. So to me, that's the greatest educational challenge that we have. Is like, how do we fast track critical thinking for primary school students because of this AI tool? I think, that's, to me, we haven't even started thinking about that, but I reckon that's going to be a big one going forward.
So you raise a really good point. How do these young people who don't have the context, how do they even know what questions to ask, right? They may know they need to ask questions, but because they haven't had the life experience or, the job that's, they've seen some of this before, the context, they won't know what questions to ask. So wouldn't it be important then to really provide our young people, anyone really, but certainly early careers and people who are still trying to acquire context, as much opportunity as possible to experience things?
Yeah, that's right. It gets back to our earlier point, doesn't it? It's
in the real world too, not in theory, but in the real world.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how we would do that, but I think if we start realizing that this is going to be one of the biggest challenges, then I think it is something that we can start overcoming. And I think it could be part of training, particularly when I say training, I mean education. And I'm specifically talking about primary school kids here. AI training, I sort of see it in a bit of a concentric circle. So you start the training with saying, what is AI? How is it built? What is a large language model, etc. Then perhaps you might learn some basic skills. What is prompt engineering? How do you use this tool? Then you need to ask, well, what's ethically the way that you use this tool? What, when and how should I use this? And what are the dangers, the security aspects and stuff that we have to think about? But then importantly, the final ring is, why am I using this tool? What information is it giving to me? And, is this the right information? It's that critical thinking part. And I think unless we're looking at all of those layers of AI, we'll be underservicing our young people in teaching them how to use this tool.
But also, I think we need to always bear in mind the human element and connect our young people to the people that do have, I guess, a lot of life experience, a lot of context, so they can actually pass on that experience so people can know what questions to ask. Not just know that they need to ask questions. It's one thing to tell people, hey, you need to ask questions, you need to come up with questions. Okay, well, what do I ask?
What do I ask? Yeah. What's the problem I'm trying to solve? Exactly.
Yeah. So it's all right for you to know because you've had 10, 20 years of experience. You've got that gut feeling. I don't have that gut feeling because I haven't had that experience. To come up with that question, something has sparked, that need to ask that question, right? And usually it comes from something you've done in the past or seen or heard or experienced.
People you've met. And that's right. So maybe we need more field trips. Maybe that's going to be the answer.
Well, I think so. More field trips, just more real world interactions, less inside the classroom, but take what we learn in the classroom and just flip it outside the classroom, real world experiences. this is probably goes into area why I'm actually really keen on this whole learn while you learn idea. And the Future Skills organization published a report recently that looks at this model and the recommendations of what should we do about it and exploring new models. I think it's learn while you learn. It is going to be something that definitely needs a lot more attention to see what does it actually mean, how does it fit inside a new education and training model,
and how do we do it? Because
how do we
practically,
do it?
I think it's a challenge as well.
Mm.
Because I completely agree. I think getting people into more real world situations is extremely beneficial. We know
Yeah.
this. I guess
How is the question?
how is
Yeah.
the question? And I think, how is it that we're working between business or industry and education? And I think we do expect a lot of our businesses, the vast majority of Australian businesses are small to medium. They just don't have the capacity to be able to shepherd a young person through their day to day. So how do we overcome that? My members are the large businesses of Australia, and they all have incredible earn while you learn programs, graduate programs, internships, all these sort of things, because they're able to set up those kind of mechanisms.
There are teams and departments of functions that actually focus just on that.
Just on that. That's exactly right. And so they're, of course, they're leading the way in this. And I'm incredibly proud of the work that my businesses are doing. But then how do we replicate that for small and medium businesses so that they are gaining value from having a young person embedded in their workplace, but they also are being able to share their knowledge in a semi-structured way? It's a problem we haven't quite solved.
Yeah, and this is something that I think the first step to solving this problem is one, to acknowledge that there is one, right? And often when I sort of talk to education leaders about the need to have programs, a lot of the first responses are, "Oh, we have these programs already."
Yeah.
Right, which is true, but these programs are usually with the big companies, and because there's only, as you point out, there are only so many big companies, and most of the jobs are not with the big companies. Yes, they have a lot of jobs, obviously, but the SMB sector is the primary engine room for employment.
Our entire Australian economy. That's exactly right.
I think like 2/3 of the jobs come from SMBs, and these are not just companies with a couple of people in it. These are probably 50, 100-person companies, 200 people companies. This is where most of the jobs are.
That's right. That's exactly right. And yet they are less exposed to young people and potential. It's like, isn't it great to be able to shape a young person as they're sort of finishing their education so that they're, a really great fit for your workplace and you can snap them up straight away.
And hardly, going back to apprenticeships then, hardly any small business actually takes on apprenticeships, at least in the tech sector anyway.
Tech sector is interesting. That's exactly right. I think, I've been thinking about this a lot because it's a problem and I don't know if we've really stepped it through. From what I'm hearing, I think unlike a trade apprenticeship, which is a very well established pathway and system, and there's different sort of levels of work that these trade students can do, an apprentice can do. But with tech apprenticeships, you can't just have someone go off and just code on their own. It needs to be a very sort of almost one-on-one kind of education, which is extremely difficult for a business to deliver. That's incredibly resource intensive. So having the exact same model for our trades into tech, I don't actually think it's going to work. In my mind, the model that would potentially work is almost like a hybrid model where a tech student would do, say, 9 months in the classroom where they're actually learning the basics of that work. Go into the workplace and complete their qualification for a shorter period of time. The benefits of that is, of course, they're on a training wage for a lot less time than if they'd from the beginning, but it means that workplaces are getting a far more finished product from day one that they then help shape and build going forward. And I just don't know if we've figured that out because scale and tech apprenticeships, huge problem.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned scale. That's one thing that I've explored a few of my guests around on the show as well, is I think different people understand scale differently. I think most people probably think of scale in the absolute terms. Scale, if a program has thousands of people in it or tens of thousands of people in it, that's large scale. But when we're thinking about the world of AI and how it's disrupting industries and changing ways that we work, it's everyone, right? It's every industry, it's every country even. So scale in that sense, we're talking, let's say people, it's in the millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions, billions, right? So in the absolute sense, in the traditional, 10,000 person program, it's scale, yes. But if we compare it in the relative sense to the population, those are just rounding errors. Probably not even rounding errors.
Yeah,
right?
that's exactly right.
So we need a national approach. We need a very sort of well thought through national approach to this, and pretty quickly too.
And the speed, I think, is a big issue, isn't it? It's like, it's one thing if we kind of ponder on this for another 3 years and then maybe roll something out. It's going to be way too late. But in my mind, we have the products, we have the training materials. They are available right now. You know, the Institute of Applied Technology Digital is something that I just think is an incredible setup. I'm sure your listeners are aware of this, but it's a great partnership between Microsoft, TAFE New South Wales, Macquarie Uni, and UTS. So it is this partnership between vet, higher ed, and industry. They've created these phenomenal products. They're great. They're only available in New South Wales. Now, if those products were available nationwide, that's immediately some free, relevant, high quality, short training that could be made available to every business across Australia.
Actually, I'm glad you brought up that example because the scale is quite phenomenal when you look at it. I think they've exceeded 300,000 enrollments now, which is, if you think about it, the whole higher education sector in Australia is 1.6 million. So that's about 20% of the sector, in terms of numbers, right? Not the type of students, but just numbers. And they've done it in how many years? It's only just a few short years, right? So the model is definitely something, that model works. We need to go down that kind of thing,
and
where unis partner.
That's right. It's completely scalable. This is my sort of vision around, you design with industry leaders and you deliver to all. We don't need to partner with 100,000 small businesses in order to create these products. You go to CyberCX and say, can you help me design a fantastic cybersecurity short course? You go to Microsoft to say, can you help me with software engineering? These industry leaders are there. We just form the partnerships, create the products, and make sure we can get them into the hands of all the small and medium businesses in Australia.
And make it easy for SMBs to consume, to use.
Make it easy for them. That's right. And even people, people looking for work who are looking to upskill, then these sort of courses are fantastic for them. So yeah, getting in the hands of all Australians, that's the next bit.
Yeah. So we talked about the importance of curiosity, the importance of critical thinking. You mentioned in a conference setting recently that AI can never replace relationships. I agree, absolutely agree. But relationships mean different things to different people, though, right? And different generations. Some of the younger generation, maybe the Gen Zs or these Gen Alphas, their relationships, a lot of it are digital, they're online. You kind of also hear people sort of talk about relationships with their AI chatbot, and it's bizarre, but it happens. And apparently it's actually happening quite quickly and at quite large scale too, but how do we protect that? How do we nurture that? And how do we actually bring that back to the center again?
I think by recognizing its value. And this is where, when we talk about skill shortages and, what are the top skills that Australians need, I think it really comes back down to these behavioral skills. As I say, problem solving, critical thinking, but communication, teamwork. This is how we survive. This is, what keeps us together and really be able to leverage all these fantastic new tools that are being made available to us. And again, returning to that skills and knowledge breakdown, there's no reason. In fact, I find it baffling. Vet students are not taught communication, teamwork, critical thinking,
collaborating across boundaries.
Collaborating, absolutely. All those core skills that you sort of get in your university degree, they should absolutely be taught in vet, because these are the skills that are going to define the human race going forward. Humanities.
Some might say they are kind of taught that because they are put into group projects. Therefore,
That's true. Well, in a workplace. But I'm afraid I would hate to say that, not every workplace is created equal in terms of training some of those skills, which is disappointing.
I think that's probably it then. It's kind of assumed they would pick up these collaboration skills or communication skills because they're put into a setting, but they're not intentionally taught the communication and collaboration skills in a structured way.
And what we know, what gets measured matters. And so unless we're putting, this down as a competency that you must have communication skills, then it won't be valued, and it won't be sought after. And, I don't think that a trade student necessarily gets those skills in some workplaces, particularly the really small sites, for example, the really small job sites or workplaces. So yeah, it should be there as a very clear behavioural competency that students need to work on.
And a really clear set of guidelines as to what does good communication look like.
What do we mean by these topics?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
constantly never ceases to surprise me. Different people interpret it differently. We might take certain communications protocols as a given. For example, being in the workforce, you send someone an email, you write it in a certain way, you respond in a certain time frame, or But Gen Zs, for example, behave differently. And sometimes you kind of think, oh, okay, well, why did they do that, or why did they not do that? And it comes down to, well, no one's ever told them.
Yeah.
No one's ever told them that you need to talk to people like this, or this is not a good way to say things, or when someone reacts like this is how you respond. It's kind of left to them to discover it for themselves, and sometimes they don't discover it.
That's what, sometimes they don't discover it and then they're left behind. Yeah, that's exactly right. I think, and that's where I perhaps a little controversial in that I do think the apprenticeship model should have more of that face-to-face classroom
Yeah.
environment because,
Yeah.
unless we're as confident that trade students, for example, are getting that really quality education within their workplace, then they could be missing out on a lot. And I that's where the danger lies.
Yeah. I think the apprenticeship model is so useful because you're pairing up someone who's just coming through the system, not a lot of context, not a lot of the real world, but you're paired up with someone who's been around for a long time, who does have a lot of context, does have a lot of real world experience, and they can then start learning some of the, people call them soft skills. I really don't like that term because that kind of devalues it almost, right? Oh, it's soft, so I don't need to
I
learn
don't
that.
need it. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
right.
it's not that important. I want to learn the
Yeah.
hard skills; they're more valuable, right? Yes, definitely we should change the wording, maybe durable skills or transferable skills, human skills. But that apprenticeship model, I was talking to Ryan Craig, who's the president of the American Apprentice Association. That's part of the sector in the US I sense is getting a bit of a revival now. Spotlight on the importance of that, the practicality of that for productivity and job growth,
Job
satisfaction.
mobility as well, like
Yeah.
they are great underpinning skills that if they retrain in other technical skills, they can go on and do another job. Yeah.
One thing, though, talking to Ryan, they're actually looking to Australia as a really good example of how to do things in innovation. They look at places like Europe and Germany, for example. In the US, the apprenticeship model is still nowhere near where it needs to be. So it's starting from a very low base. And we're doing a number of things we take for granted, like our RTOs, our GTOs. They don't have that. And so this is something really keen to see how we can actually build a tighter connection between us and the US, us and Europe. Take some of the things that as Aussies take for granted. We've always done things this way. Actually works really well. We can probably blend it with some new thinking, new ways of working, and really invent sort of the RTO, GTO 2.0 for the AI
Yeah.
era.
Wouldn't that be
Yeah.
brilliant? I'm a huge
Yeah.
fan of the GCOs. I think this
Yeah.
is the interesting part of where we are right now. I think skill shortages are global now. So all our partners and our competitors, all of us are faced with the same kind of skill shortages, which means that we're all going after the same people, which makes it difficult in terms of
Yeah.
overcoming these skills. But as you say, it means that there's a lot of opportunity to learn from the innovation from one another because we're all trying to solve the same problem. So it's
Yeah.
quite a unique sort of time, I think.
The global nature of it also means, that we need some kind of an underpinning digital model almost. So the Australian government has this national skills taxonomy program to try and codify, the skills language. But people in Singapore have it as well, and Europe and the US. Everyone's trying to solve this problem. I think it's a very complex problem to solve, but it's so critical because if you don't have the common language, or let's say we develop a language, that's used in Australia, how is the skill in Australia different to a skill in the US, for example?
Yeah. Look, I'm with you on that. I feel that there are already some global taxonomies that are used quite widely. And again, makes sense that I feel that we draw from that. Yeah, going in with a global mindset when it comes to taxonomies, I think is a really important
Yeah.
step.
Yeah. All right. So I do want to sort of shift gears a little bit to bring the podcast episode to a close. And the question that I ask as well is, given this is an education one, is about teachers. We've all been shaped by our teachers, be it school teachers or, in a workplace. It might be a manager or, sports coach. But Peter, who has been your teacher that's been impactful? I know your parents are teachers, but,
Oh, no, it's actually my siblings that are
oh,
teachers. They're not, my parents aren't my
okay.
siblings. Yeah.
But in your sort of, growing up and in your going into your careers, who's been a teacher that's really shaped things and why?
Oh, I'm sure everyone gets warm fuzzies when you ask them these questions because, yeah, it's always a special relationship with that one teacher, isn't it? So mine was a woman called Mari Clark, who was my English teacher in my final years of school in years 11 and 12. And she was such a glamorous, elegant woman, and she just float through the classrooms wearing these glamorous hats. And so she was so beautiful. I absolutely adored her. But I think what I loved about her was at that time, I wanted to do double English and I wasn't able to because of the structure of my curriculum at the time. And she agreed to set up a special class just with her and I, where we would meet in the library once a week and we created our own curriculum. And then I had to go off and learn it and then come back and report to her each week. And it enabled me to really deep dive into the things that I was passionate about, which was at the time, it was, international politics, the social aspects of civil war, all these sort of really different nitty-gritty things that I was completely obsessed with. She enabled me to create this curriculum that allowed me to look at these things. And so not only was it a fantastic experience just learning from this woman who just asked me questions constantly and had me on my toes, so I was pushing myself further and further, but it showed me that if you are curious and if you are driven, don't ever let the system get in your way because you can find ways around the system to make sure that you can push forward and do what you need to do. So Mari Clark, incredible woman.
And look at the impact she's had. Now you're challenging the system and reshaping it for this AI generation. So, Mari Clark, if you're listening,
that's right.
This is your impact.
She created a monster and someone who's very good at breaking down systems. I love it.
Yeah, fantastic. And so, the last segment of the show is a fun one. It's action for plugs. It's an opportunity for you to put a spotlight on someone or something or some organization that you find particularly interesting or impactful, you think our audience should check out. So who or what would you like to plug?
For me, I mentioned it earlier, it's the Institute of Applied Technology Digital. I love the work they're doing. I love that they have these micro credentials or mini skills that are available for free, really high quality training in those core tech skills. I just hope everyone jumps on their websites and sits some of the courses because they're really, really valuable.
Fantastic. Thank you, Peita. And the details for IATD will be in the show notes. So do check them out and doing some amazing stuff. Definitely a model that we should look at replicating and scaling up across not just New South Wales, but nationally, but even overseas as well. US listeners.
Model works. That's right.
Yeah, that's right. So thank you. And that is another episode of Relearning Works. Thanks for tuning in and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.